Neligh Carnegie Library has now been added to the list of National Register of Historic Places. The library was built in 1910 with funding from steel businessman Andrew Carnegie. It is one of approximately 2,500 Carnegie libraries constructed worldwide. 69 of those were built in Nebraska. Before this library was built, Neligh subscribed to a traveling library, but once it's complete, it became a center of local educational efforts through its collection and hosting of events.